I still remember the first time I put on the uniform. It wasn't one of those proud moments you see on recruitment posters or military family photo albums. It was quiet, practical, like slipping into a job no one else wanted to do. No camera flashes, no hugs from proud parents. Just me, a mirror in a shared dorm room, and a pair of boots I had no idea how to lace correctly. I was 22, fresh out of the Air Force Academy, heading into Space Force back when everyone still made jokes like, "What are you gonna do, fight aliens?" My family didn't get it. My dad had been a Marine back in the day and couldn't wrap his head around me choosing what he called the Wi-Fi branch. He used to say, "The only satellite I trust is the one on my truck." My mom wasn't much better. She was still clinging to some 1952nd idea of what daughters were supposed to do. Something safe. Something that involved modest blouses and grandbabies. She told people I had gone into computers, as if I'd just taken a tech support job at Best Buy. That was easier than explaining national defense infrastructure or orbital threat response. It was the little things that started stacking up. My brother Kyle got a framed picture with Dad in his police cadet uniform. Danielle, my younger sister, got a full backyard party when she got into med school. When I shipped off to training, Mom dropped me off at the bus station and said, "Text when you land, if they let you." That was it. No one came to my commissioning ceremony. They said they had a thing that weekend. I never even asked what the thing was. I stood on that stage alone, saluted the flag, and watched another girl's dad cry next to me while mine probably watched football. At first, I tried to make excuses for them. I thought, maybe they didn't understand what Space Force actually did. Maybe it was too new, too unfamiliar. I mean, even the name sounded like a punchline. But over time, it became clear it wasn't confusion. It was dismissal. I learned pretty quickly that silence runs in my family. Not the peaceful kind either. The passive-aggressive kind. The kind where no one says anything to your face, but you can feel the weight of their judgment like a hand on your shoulder that never lifts. It came in backhanded compliments. "Oh, I didn't think you'd still be in that military thing." Or, "You must be so tired sitting at a desk all day." I once tried to explain what I actually did. That I was working on threat assessment models, monitoring satellite traffic for hostile intent, supporting joint operations. My dad blinked and asked if I still got a lunch break. Kyle, my brother, thought it was hilarious. "So, you're like the mall security guard of outer space?" he said once at Thanksgiving. Mom told him to be nice, but she was smiling. I remember because it was the same day I found out Kyle had been suspended for letting a DUI go because the guy was a good old boy. But sure, I was the disgrace. I stuck it out, deployed twice. Got moved to a deep cold post in Alaska for a joint intel project. Froze my ass off for a year and a half monitoring data relays and tracking patterns the public wouldn't even believe if I told them. Not that I could. Everything I did was classified, buried under red tape, which meant, to my family, I was still just doing emails. It messed with me more than I'd like to admit. I used to stay up late, staring at the ceiling, wondering how many people like me were out there doing the dirty work, keeping the system from collapsing, while our own families treated us like underachievers. It wasn't even about the praise. I didn't need a parade, but damn, a thank you wouldn't have killed them. When I got promoted to captain, I sent a group text to the family. No reply for 3 days. Then finally my mom texted back, "Danielle's ultrasound went well today." That was her version of celebrating my career. Danielle was always the golden child, the med school star, the girl who actually invited the family to things. I was proud of her, genuinely. But it stung seeing the way my parents lit up when she walked into a room and barely looked up when I did. I didn't even need to compete. I just wanted to exist. Still, I told myself, it's fine. I have my work. I'm making a difference, even if they don't see it. Then one day, I got a call that changed everything. Not from my family, from a commander higher up. Something had gone wrong with a drone relay. Alaska was freezing over literally, and we had to run diagnostics before the Russians could exploit the downtime. I was supposed to be off duty, but they trusted me more than anyone else. So I put my uniform back on, logged in, and stayed up 36 hours straight to make sure nothing went wrong. When I finally shut my laptop, I looked around my empty apartment. No one knew what I'd just done. No one would ever know. And if I told my family, they'd probably say something like, "Hope you got paid for that." That's when it hit me, maybe they weren't ever going to get it. Maybe I was never going to be enough for them. Not unless I wore the right uniform, the one they respected. And mine didn't count. At least, not to them. But that didn't mean I was done. Not even close. I didn't quit. That's what people like my dad never understood. When I got medically separated from active duty, it wasn't because I gave up. It was because my spine had literally frozen twice during that Alaskan rotation. I'd slipped on black ice coming out of a power hut during a blackout, slammed hard enough to fracture 2 vertebrae, and still dragged my ass back up to finish the night shift. That was the job. You didn't stop just because it hurt. After I got home, the doctors told me I'd be able to walk, but probably never pass another military physical. That ended my active service. Just like that. No parade, no closure, no thanks. I flew back to Georgia with a lumbar brace and a classified file in my bag. My mom picked me up from the airport and said, "Well, at least you can rest now." I told her I wasn't retiring. I was transferring into civilian federal work. She blinked and asked if that meant I was unemployed. I said no. She nodded like she didn't believe me. I moved into a 1-bedroom apartment 20 minutes from my parents' house and took a job contracting for a federal cybersecurity firm that handled multi-agency threat mitigation. My clearance carried over. My skill set translated. My salary tripled. But to my family, it was like I'd faded off the map. My brother Kyle came by once, unannounced. He saw the dual-screen setup, the private server, the fiber line. Said, "Damn, sis. Looks like you're running a hacker bunker." I smiled and said, "Something like that." He posted a picture on Instagram with the caption, "My sister, the cyber spy." Then he tagged me in it. I nearly lost my clearance cleaning that mess up. At Thanksgiving that year, I brought a pumpkin pie and a new neck brace. My spine was acting up again. Dad looked at me across the table and said, "How long you planning to milk that injury?" I laughed, like it was a joke, but it wasn't. Kyle, of course, had recently been rehired at the county sheriff's office after a brief administrative leave nobody was supposed to mention. Mom was thrilled. She made him a giant welcome back cake shaped like a badge. I brought a bottle of wine. She told me not to open it because Kyle's back on duty now. Danielle showed up late, as usual, wearing a perfectly ironed coat and high heels that made her look like an off-duty news anchor. Her new fiancé, Sean, stood next to her clean-cut, broad shoulders, navy dress blues. The moment he stepped in, my parents lit up like he was the guest of honor. Which, in their eyes, I guess he was. Sean was polite, firm handshake, didn't talk much. But he didn't look at me twice. Not out of rudeness, just indifference. I didn't register. That part stung more than I wanted it to. At one point during dinner, Danielle asked how work was. I said I was overseeing a 0-day vulnerability test on a joint platform. She nodded, then said, "Oh, I meant your real job." Everyone laughed. Even Sean chuckled, though I could tell he didn't really get the joke. I sat there, smiling with my jaw clenched, counting down the seconds until I could leave. That night, I opened my laptop and logged into a live simulation for breach tracking across military comms networks. It was the kind of work that, if I failed, people died. But nobody at that dinner table would ever know that. The following spring, I found out Danielle was getting married. How did I find out? A picture popped up on Kyle's feed. Danielle in white, Sean in uniform, my parents glowing on either side. I wasn't invited, not forgotten, just excluded, cleanly, quietly, like an old box someone didn't have room for. No one called. No one texted. When I finally asked Mom why, she said, "We just figured you wouldn't be comfortable with all the people and loud music and everything." I stared at the phone and said nothing. She added, "Besides, it's not like you're close with Sean." Right, because apparently not close meant invisible. It was around then I stopped showing up to everything. Birthdays, holidays, Sunday dinners. I still sent gifts on time, neatly wrapped, never acknowledged. I still transferred money to Kyle when his truck broke down and he couldn't let the squad see him in a rental. I still offered tech support when Dad's business email got hacked, but I didn't show up. Showing up didn't seem to matter. I once overheard Mom on the phone with a neighbor. She said, "Danielle's doing so well. Married to a real officer, such a blessing. Kyle's back in uniform. And Monica, well, she's figuring things out." I was 36. I'd served for over a decade, saved classified networks from foreign breaches, written defense protocols adopted by 2 federal agencies. And to my own mother, I was figuring things out. So, I did what any underappreciated daughter with a top-secret clearance and a chip on her shoulder would do. I got back to work. I deleted Instagram that night. The picture had been up for 12 hours before I saw it. Danielle in a white lace dress, Sean in navy dress whites, standing on the front steps of a Baptist church that had hosted half our family weddings since the 82nd. My parents were smiling so hard it looked like their faces might crack. Kyle had his arm around some blonde I didn't recognize. There were over 200 likes and a comment from my mom that said, "A perfect day, a perfect match." I stared at that caption for a long time. No one had told me Danielle's wedding was that weekend. No invite, no save the date, not even a heads up. Just digital proof that I had officially been cut from the family highlight reel. I don't know what I expected. Danielle had stopped including me in group texts months before that, claiming I always turned everything into a lecture. What she meant was, I corrected her when she said China had hacked the DMV. Still, I never thought I'd be erased entirely. I didn't message her. I didn't call. I didn't even like the photo. I just stared at it until my phone screen went dim. Then I got up, walked to the kitchen, and started shredding the invitation I never received because, let's be real, if it had come, it would have just said, "Don't bother." A week later, my mom called out of the blue and said, "Did you see the photos? Wasn't she just stunning? Like nothing was wrong. Like I was a distant cousin on a different continent." I said, "Yeah, she looked great." Mom went on and on about the flowers, the cake, how Sean's Navy friends all stood and saluted during the vows. I leaned against the counter and bit my lip hard enough to draw blood. Then she said it, the sentence that stayed with me for months. It was such a proud moment for the family. Everyone who mattered was there. That was it. That was the moment I realized I didn't matter. At least, not to them. But somehow, I kept participating. In weird, pathetic ways. I was the backup tech support they forgot to thank, the emergency money transfer. The one who probably doesn't have plans anyway. I once got a Venmo request from Kyle labeled family favors, like I was a damn ATM. The next time I saw everyone in person was during a cookout at Dad's for Memorial Day. I showed up because I was tired of hiding. Wore a gray button-down, jeans, boots I hadn't worn since deployment. Brought a 6-pack and a pie. Nobody said thanks. Kyle was already drunk by 2 p.m. He came up to me grinning like an idiot and said, "So, you gonna tell anyone what you actually do for a living? Or are we just pretending you're still in space camp?" I smiled like I didn't hear it. Sean wasn't there on deployment. Danielle came alone, looking exhausted. She didn't even make eye contact with me, just muttered, "Glad you could make it," like I was an old boss she had to acknowledge. My mom pulled me aside halfway through the day and whispered, "Can you not talk about work today? It just makes things weird." So I didn't. I stood in the back corner of my own father's yard, drinking warm beer, watching people ignore me, while a playlist of 2000-second country music played on a cheap Bluetooth speaker. A kid spilled juice on my shoes. No one apologized. At one point, someone handed me a tray of deviled eggs and said, "Can you just take these inside?" Sure. Why not? It's what the help does. When I got home that night, I sat on my couch in silence. My back ached from standing too long, but I didn't bother taking meds. Just stared at the wall, thinking about how people don't have to yell at you to make you feel small. Sometimes all they have to do is not see you. I didn't sleep well after that. My work was ramping up. We were working on a new integration protocol for Department of Defense SATCOM relay security, and I was leading the internal red team testing. The kind of thing that gets briefed to actual generals, but you don't put that on a Facebook status. I was up late one night writing incident escalation templates when a friend from my Air Force Academy days messaged me. Her name was Jordan, now doing intel for the Navy out of San Diego. We caught up, and somewhere in the chat she said, "Hey, your name came up in a briefing. You doing back-end compliance on Navcom Sector Echo?" I said, "Yeah." She said, "Your threat matrix saved a joint exercise last week. No one told you?" No one told me. Apparently, a vulnerability I flagged months earlier was patched just in time to prevent a major exploit simulation from crashing half a fleet's communication net during a readiness drill. It hadn't made the news, but internally it was a big deal. So I was still protecting people. Even now. Quietly, invisibly, professionally. I closed my laptop and stared at the dark window for a while. The only light in the room came from the power strip in the corner. I could still hear Kyle's voice in my head. Space camp. I smiled. Not because it was funny, just because it was familiar. The next day, Danielle texted me for the first time in months. It was short. "Sean's unit is deploying again. Think you could pray for him?" I typed a response. Then deleted it. Then typed again. "Sure, I'm always watching." I hit send. She didn't get the joke. I started keeping track of the things I did for them. Not in a petty way, at least. Not at first. More like a habit. A little mental list every time they needed something and I stepped in. Because even if they didn't see me, they sure knew where to find me when something broke. When Dad's HVAC scheduling system got hacked and his appointments started disappearing, he called me in a panic. "It's all gone," he said, like someone had set the house on fire. I remoted in, traced the breach to a phishing scam, cleaned out the ransomware, and installed two-factor authentication. It took me 2 hours. He didn't say thank you. Just told Mom to get me a Diet Coke from the fridge. When Kyle locked himself out of his email because he forgot the answers to his security questions, one of which was, "What was your first dog's name?" He put Meatball instead of Meaty. I fixed it while he sat next to me eating a sub. He offered me half. I declined. I didn't say no to any of it. I didn't even hesitate. Because I'd spent years building firewalls and protocols and rescue systems for people I'd never meet, and when it was my own blood asking, it felt wrong to shut the door. But after a while, the silence after every favor started to echo. One day, I caught a stray comment on Facebook from one of Mom's church friends. She'd posted about Danielle's miracle pregnancy, and the comment read, "You're so lucky to have children who make you proud." My mom replied, "We sure are. Children, plural. But I wasn't in the photo. A week later, I transferred $1,000 to Kyle because his brakes were making this grinding noise, and I can't risk an accident while on duty. I asked him for the repair receipt. He said, "You don't trust me now?" I said, "I work in threat assessment. It's nothing personal." He never sent it. At work, I was managing a Tier 3 response protocol for an upcoming simulated breach across Navy comms. The exercise was sensitive, high pressure, and built around stress testing unit response time. The data packets we injected were designed to mimic real-world attack signatures from advanced adversaries. It was a big deal. My name was on the rollout. At home, I was still the sister with the internet job. My phone buzzed on a Saturday afternoon. Mom. She wanted to know if I could come by and look at the television. It wasn't turning on. She said, "Your dad's convinced it's a deep state signal jammer." I showed up, checked the remote, changed the batteries. It turned on immediately. Mom laughed and said, "See? I told him you were good with this stuff." This stuff. I stayed for dinner for some reason. Danielle was there, glowing like every pregnant woman in a pharmaceutical ad. Kyle, too, nursing a beer and playing with someone's kid who may or may not have been his. I couldn't keep track anymore. I sat through a conversation about gender reveal parties, new kitchen tile, and whether Sean would be home in time for Christmas. No one asked me anything. Not about work, not about my life, not even how my back was doing after Alaska. Just silence and second helpings. At one point, Danielle joked, "If I have a girl, maybe she'll end up on a rocket with you one day." Everyone laughed. I smiled. My jaw was getting good at pretending. On my way out, Dad pulled me aside. He said, "You know, you don't always have to be so serious." I said, "You mean quiet?" He shrugged. "Same thing." It wasn't. A few days later, I logged in to check a network anomaly reported by a junior analyst. It was nothing, just a malformed ping. But I stayed online longer than necessary, digging into backlogs. My fingers moved fast. I wasn't thinking about the data. I was thinking about that dinner table, about my name not being mentioned once. I was running a passive audit on Sean's unit's comms when I spotted a string of anomalies. Repeated packet loss, dropped pings, inconsistent timestamps. It was subtle, but consistent. Too consistent to be a glitch. I filed an internal note, flagged it for monitoring, and created a sandbox to test incoming traffic. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but it didn't feel random. Later that night, I got a message from Danielle. Hey, baby shower's in 3 weeks. Not sure if you'd be comfortable coming, but wanted to let you know. Comfortable. That word again. The polite way to exclude someone without admitting it. I replied, thanks. I'll think about it. I didn't go. Instead, I sent a gift, a biometric monitor for pregnancy health tracking, FDA-approved, secured protocol. It cost me $800 and took 3 days to configure. No one said anything. I checked the shipping receipt delivered, signed for by D. Simons. That was Danielle's married name now. The silence after that felt heavier than usual, like something was shifting. Maybe it was just me, starting to notice that no matter how many times I showed up, I was still standing outside the frame. But I didn't stop helping. Not yet. Because deep down, I think I still believed that if I just did enough, they'd finally let me in the room. I didn't mean to overhear it. I'd stopped by my parents' house to drop off some backup drives I'd encrypted for Dad's business. He'd asked for help securing his tax software after clicking on a patriotic tax discount ad that nearly bricked his laptop. I let myself in with the old garage code. They'd never changed it, probably forgot how. I was halfway down the hallway when I heard my mom on the phone in the kitchen. Her voice was low, tired. I didn't catch who she was talking to. Maybe an aunt. Maybe her church friend who always thought I was too smart for my own good. She said, Monica, she's not like the other two. She's complicated. I don't think she even wants to be part of the family anymore. Honestly, sometimes it feels like she's just a burden. I froze. That word, burden. Like I was a medical bill or an old appliance no one wanted to throw out because they still remembered when it worked. I stood there, staring at the cheap family portrait on the wall, us, 10 years younger, before my deployment. I looked different back then. Softer, smiling, still trying. I backed out quietly and left the drives on the kitchen table. I didn't say goodbye, didn't slam the door. I just got in my car and sat behind the wheel for 10 minutes, gripping the steering wheel like I might snap it in half. On the drive home, I didn't cry. Not a single tear. But my jaw ached from how hard I was clenching it. Later that night, I got a text from Kyle. Hey, Dad said you stopped by. Thanks for the nerd stuff. No punctuation, no emoji, just another line item in a list of services rendered. I didn't respond. 2 days after that, I logged into our federal contractor platform to submit a performance report and noticed something flagged in the internal audit logs. A dormant exploit attempt had been registered against an encrypted DoD channel. I ran a trace. It was an old vulnerability I'd reported 6 months ago, thought it had been patched. It hadn't. And the target? A series of joint comms nodes used by Sean's unit. I filed the necessary escalation. Wrote up a technical memo. Attached reference logs, timeline analysis, suggested containment measures. I don't think I blinked for 3 hours. At the bottom of the memo, I signed off with, action recommended, immediate segmentation, high-risk path observed, RND. 2 hours later, I got pinged by someone in the Navy's defensive cyber unit. This just saved us a major headache. How did you spot that? I didn't respond right away. I was too busy wondering whether Sean had any idea who just pulled the fire alarm behind the scenes. The funny part? I didn't even particularly like him. Sean was decent, sure, polite, but stiff. He treated me like an acquaintance, not family. Which was fair, his wife barely considered me one. But I still flagged the threat. Still did the work. Because even if they couldn't see me, I knew I was keeping them safe. That had to count for something. Somewhere. The following week, I stopped by the house again. I don't know why. Habit, maybe. Danielle was there with her newborn, sitting on the couch like a queen with a crown made of spit-up towels. My mom was hovering over her like an attendant. Kyle was asleep in the recliner. Dad was on the porch drinking black coffee like it was whiskey. I brought a gift, an encrypted baby monitor with no Wi-Fi vulnerabilities. I'd installed a firewall on the firmware myself. Took me 4 hours. Danielle said, Oh, thanks. But Sean already ordered one. I nodded and placed the box on the table. Kyle stirred and looked at me with bleary eyes. So how's the job hunt going? I blinked. I have a job. He smirked. Still? Thought you were, freelancing or whatever. I didn't answer. Mom cleared her throat. You know, you should really consider something more stable. Like teaching. You're good with computers. Kids love that stuff. I stared at her, unsure if she genuinely didn't know what I did or if she was just pretending not to. Dad chimed in from outside. Yeah, something with a pension. These contractor things, they'll drop you the moment budgets get tight. Danielle didn't even look up. I stood there. In the middle of the living room, I helped rewire after their power issues last winter, holding my breath so hard it hurt. No one noticed I didn't sit down. No one asked how I was doing. No one cared. When I got home, I pulled up the secure dashboard for the network I'd just protected. It showed green across all monitored nodes, Sean's included. Protected, stable, invisible. I clicked into the change logs, reread my own patch notes. Then I minimized everything and sat in silence. The next morning, I got a forwarded email, a security bulletin, distributed to Senior Navy Command. My patch had made it into the National Defensive Framework. I was credited by ID only. No name. No ceremony. Just a line of code and a job well done. Still, someone had to do it, even if the people closest to you think you're nothing but a burden. I didn't sleep that night. After the security bulletin landed in my inbox, I sat at my desk staring at the notification like it might vanish. That kind of acknowledgement didn't come often, not for contractors, especially not ones buried under 5 layers of clearance and NDAs. But there it was, my fix, adopted into National Navy protocol. My line of code, running on the comms infrastructure of Sean's unit, keeping them from going dark during a deployment. And no one in my family knew. Not a soul. I didn't tell them. Not out of spite, at least. Not entirely. It was more like, what's the point? What would I say? Hey, remember when you thought I was doing it for Uber drivers? Turns out I kept your son-in-law from getting ghosted mid-mission in the Pacific. They'd laugh. Or worse, smile and nod like I was making it up. Like I was exaggerating for validation. So I let it sit. At work, the buzz died down quickly. That's the nature of my world. You do something huge, potentially life-saving, and the most you get is a line in a PDF and a virtual thumbs up from some guy in Virginia with no profile picture. I didn't need a parade. But still, it felt surreal that I'd just protected a naval deployment and couldn't even tell my own parents. The following week, I was looped into a private discussion group for emerging threat research. High-level stuff. Not theory, practical defense measures for asymmetric communication breaches. The kind of work that got handed directly to commanders. They were looking for a lead analyst to run red team ops across multiple joint force branches. I took it. I wasn't trying to impress anyone. I was just good at it. I saw patterns early. I stayed up late. I triple-checked what others missed. If that made me boring at family dinners, so be it. I'd rather be boring and effective than loud and clueless. One night, I was working late when I saw Sean's name pop up in a case note. Not his full name, just rank, last initial, and assignment code. But it wasn't hard to guess. His unit had flagged a low-severity anomaly minor delay in secure handshake protocols during a comms check-in. It had been patched in under 3 minutes. 0 downtime, 0 fallout. I smiled. That was my patch. I didn't know where he was, exactly, obviously classified, but judging from the timestamp and packet route, they were somewhere near the Philippine Sea. Operational, active, uncompromised. That same night, my mom texted me, asking if I could help her reconnect the printer. She said it like it was urgent, the kind of emergency only I could handle. So, I logged into her desktop remotely and fixed it in 90 seconds. She replied with, "Thanks. You should work for Geek Squad," and sent a blurry picture of her cat sitting on the scanner. The whiplash between those 2 moments made me dizzy. I kept thinking about the chain of events. 1 missed packet. 1 dropped relay. 1 mistimed verification, and Sean's squad could have been cut off. Bad weather. Hostile activity. Miscommunication. Things spiral fast in that region. I knew. I'd studied the case reports. I'd reviewed the simulations, and I'd stopped it. Me. The one they never invited to family events. The one they joked, did websites or whatever. A few days later, Danielle posted a photo of Sean on Facebook. He was back on leave, holding their baby, smiling like a Norman Rockwell painting. The caption read, "Home safe. We are so proud of you." The comments flooded in. "What a hero. Thank you for your service. God bless the Navy." I didn't hit like. Instead, I stared at it for a while, wondering if she even knew he'd almost lost comms during that mission. Wondering if Sean knew someone like me, his wife's invisible sister, was the reason he could still check in. Probably not. I considered messaging him. Just to say hi. Just to ask if he got the internal bulletin. But I stopped myself. He wouldn't connect the dots. Even if he did, he wouldn't know how to bring it up without admitting he hadn't realized sooner. It didn't matter. I didn't need credit from them. But something shifted after that. I stopped trying to prove anything. Stopped waiting for someone to ask about my day. I did my work, took on more projects. Mentored a junior analyst who reminded me of myself 10 years ago, quiet, meticulous, underestimated. She had questions nobody else bothered to ask. I liked that. One afternoon, she looked at me and said, "Do your parents know how cool your job is?" I almost laughed. "No," I said. "They think I'm fixing printers." She stared at me like I was joking. I wasn't. Back at home, the family chat was still full of baby photos, Bible verses, and blurry pictures of casseroles. No one mentioned the deployment. No one mentioned Sean's brush with danger. No one asked if I'd had anything to do with anything. But deep down, I knew I'd kept someone alive, someone they all loved, and they had no idea I was even in the room. I almost didn't go. The invitation was printed on heavy cardstock with faux gold trim, like they'd spent more money on the paper than they'd ever spent on my birthdays combined. It was for Dad's 65th birthday party, a celebration of a life of hard work and honor, it said, with a bold serif font that screamed, "Retired Veteran Energy, hosted at the local country club." Dress code. Classy casual. Whatever that meant. I stared at the RSVP line for 10 minutes before checking attending. Not for them, hell no. I went because I needed to see how much more invisible I could possibly get before I stopped existing altogether. I showed up 5 minutes late, just early enough to be ignored, but not so late that they'd claim I ruined something. I wore a simple black dress, no makeup, clean boots. I brought a gift custom-etched plaque that read, "For the man who taught me how to keep standing even when no one was watching." It was sincere, foolishly so. Inside, the room was already buzzing. Linen tablecloths, dollar store floral centerpieces, a playlist of John Mellencamp and old country playing softly in the background. The guest list was peak small-town royalty. Church deacons, retired cops, someone who once ran for city council and lost by 47 votes but still wore a campaign pin. Kyle saw me first. He raised his beer and smirked like I was the punchline to a joke he hadn't finished telling. Well, look who decided to rejoin the family. And enough. Before I could answer, Mom swooped in for a half hug that smelled like Chanel and guilt. "We weren't sure you'd come. Danielle said you've been busy." Busy. The coded word for self-important. I nodded. Danielle was across the room, holding her baby like a prop, flanked by 2 of Sean's Navy friends in uniform. Sean wasn't in sight. The baby had on a tiny sailor hat, which felt like overkill, but sure. Family branding, I guess. I dropped the plaque on the gift table between a set of grilling tools and a novelty mug that said, "Old Guys Rule." Then I grabbed a cup of whatever was pretending to be champagne and tried to melt into the wallpaper. About 20 minutes in, Kyle started telling a story about that one time Monica got lost in her own neighborhood as a kid. He mimicked my voice nasal, whiny, and added, "She probably just pulled out a satellite map and hacked the clouds or whatever she does now." End of quote. People laughed. I stood behind a potted fern and sipped the flat bubbly, watching my sister smile politely like she didn't hear it. Mom was chuckling. Dad looked proud, like his son had just nailed a speech at the Rotary Club. Then I heard him say it. Monica never really grew out of the whole pretending to be important thing. But hey, she's good with computers. That's something, right? That's something. I walked out onto the patio before I threw the cup at someone's head. Outside, the air was cool and smelled like mowed grass and too much cologne. I leaned against the railing, looked up at the stars, and reminded myself I'd written protocols that helped defend the damn satellite network those constellations were orbiting through. Suddenly, I heard a voice behind me. "Nice night." It was Sean. He wasn't in uniform, just a collared shirt and khakis, but he still stood like he was in formation. He had that air of command that military guys never fully shake. I nodded. "Congrats on surviving this circus." He gave a half smile. "Just landed yesterday. Didn't even know this party was happening until Danielle texted me while I was deboarding. That surprised me. I figured he'd be the guest of honor right behind Dad." Sean looked at me for a long second. Not judgmental, not pitying, just measuring. "You're the reason we didn't lose comms last month, aren't you?" I froze. "What?" He lowered his voice. "I saw the bulletin, I connected the dots. That was your ID on the patch note." I didn't answer. He let out a breath, then said, "I didn't say anything to Danielle. Figured that wasn't my place." Still silent, I stared out at the dark trees lining the edge of the property. My chest felt tight, but not from anger. It was something else. Something quieter. Like recognition had snuck in the back door. He stepped forward. "I don't know what's going on with the family, but I know the kind of work you do. And I know it matters." I looked at him, not blinking. "Thanks," I said. My voice cracked a little, but I held it together. Then he added, "You saved lives, mine included." He turned and walked back inside. I stayed on the patio another 10 minutes, watching my own breath curl into the air. I could still hear Kyle laughing inside. Still hear Danielle doing that fake laugh she used when she didn't know how to follow up. Then the music changed. Johnny Cash. "God's Gonna Cut You Down." Fitting. I didn't go back in. I walked around to the parking lot, got in my car, and sat with my hands on the wheel. No one saw me leave. I was sitting near the back of the hall, just far enough to be forgettable but close enough to hear my name if someone bothered to say it. It was Dad's retirement dinner from the VFW. Bigger than the birthday party. Held in the main ballroom of the Veterans Center, decked out in red, white, and blue bunting like a 4th of July costume threw up on the walls. People wore ties for the first time in years. Danielle had the baby in a flag-themed onesie. Kyle wore his old academy jacket even though it didn't zip anymore. I didn't want to go. But Mom left a voicemail saying, "Your father's legacy is being honored, Monica. Try to be respectful." So I showed up. Quiet, alone. No one greeted me when I walked in. Not even a nod. The seats were arranged in tables of 8. Mine had a woman who taught high school history, a retired bus driver, and a couple who kept referring to me as Melissa. I didn't correct them. The speeches started early. There were polite chuckles at Kyle's roast-style intro, followed by a 5-minute recap of Dad's years in the Marines from a man who once served with him and now ran a bait shop. The applause was long, loud, earnest. Then came the slideshow. Grainy photos from Vietnam. Dad standing next to a Jeep. Dad holding an M16. Dad shaking hands with a governor whose name no one could remember. Every time an image came up, the audience oohed and awed like he'd just walked on the moon. No one mentioned the rest of us. Not once. Not even the family photo that still hung in their hallway. And then, just as the MC was about to wrap up, the doors opened behind me. Footsteps. Firm. Deliberate. Everyone turned their heads. It was Sean. Full dress uniform. Hat under one arm. Ribbons shining under the ballroom lights. He walked in with the kind of authority that made people shift in their seats, straighten their backs, pretend they weren't halfway through their Jell-O cups. He didn't acknowledge anyone. Not right away. He scanned the room like he was looking for a target. Then his eyes landed on me. He walked the full length of the room. Every head turned to follow. The conversation stopped. The utensils dropped. Even the PowerPoint froze on a blurry photo of Dad fishing. When Sean reached my table, he stopped. He stood up straight, shoulders squared. He looked me directly in the eyes. And then he saluted. Sharp, crisp, textbook. "Ma'am," he said. The entire room went silent. You could have heard a napkin fall. I stared at him, not blinking, not breathing. A dozen faces turned toward me, some confused, some startled, most just dumbfounded. I didn't return the salute. I wasn't in uniform. I didn't need to be. I nodded. Just once. Calm, controlled. Sean lowered his hand, stepped aside, and walked toward the front of the room like nothing happened. He took a seat next to Danielle, who looked like she'd swallowed a marble. Mom's mouth was half open. Kyle looked like he'd been slapped with a tax bill. Nobody said a word. Not to me. Not for the rest of the event. I sat there, still as stone, heart pounding so loud I thought someone might hear it over the air vents. I wasn't embarrassed. I wasn't proud. I wasn't anything you could see from the outside. But inside, something finally clicked into place. The MC fumbled his closing remarks, trying to steer attention back to Dad. He thanked everyone for coming. Someone wheeled out a cake shaped like a boot. People clapped. I didn't. On the way out, as the crowd thinned, I felt dozens of sideways glances. Some were curious, some were cautious. A few looked downright afraid. I walked through them like fog, quiet, steady, invisible but somehow, for once, untouchable. Danielle caught up to me in the parking lot. What was that? She asked. Her voice was sharp, less confused, more threatened. I kept walking. She stepped in front of me. Monica, seriously, what was that salute about? Why did he call you ma'am? I opened my car door. Ask your husband, I said. I got in, started the engine, and pulled out without looking back. That night, I didn't sleep, but it wasn't the usual kind of insomnia. I wasn't replaying a fight or an insult. I wasn't drafting imaginary comebacks or rationalizing why I kept helping people who never helped me back. I was awake, because for once I didn't feel like I had anything left to prove. They'd seen it. All of them. And whether they understood it or not, they couldn't unsee it. Sean knew. That was enough. At 2:47 a.m., I opened my laptop, logged into the secure server, and submitted my resignation from my current project. Not because I was quitting, but because I was ready for something new. I had other things to protect now. Not systems. Myself. The next morning, the group chat was strangely quiet. Normally, family events triggered a flood of messages, photos, leftover updates, passive-aggressive thank yous. This time, nothing. Not even from Mom, who could usually be counted on to post something like, "What a beautiful night for a beautiful man," beneath 15 identical photos of Dad and his cake. I didn't message anyone. I just watched the silence like someone checking for aftershocks. Around 10:30, my phone buzzed. A text from Danielle. We need to talk. I didn't respond. Instead, I got dressed, took a long walk, and bought myself a breakfast burrito the size of a shoe. I ate it on a park bench under a cloudless sky, watching a squirrel steal a cookie from a stroller cup holder. That squirrel and I had the same energy, stealthy, underestimated, and no longer apologizing. By noon, Danielle had texted twice more. What exactly does Sean know that I don't? Seriously, Monica? What's going on? I finally typed back. Ask him. She didn't reply after that. At work, I logged into my transition files and started wrapping up loose ends. My mentee, Elise, noticed something was up. You leaving the project? Yeah, I said. Time to rotate out. She nodded but didn't ask why. That's one thing I liked about people in my field, less small talk, more signal. Around 3 p.m., my office line rang. Internal, secure. It was a call from someone in Naval Signals Command. Not the usual guy. Higher up. Much higher. He thanked me for my work on the vulnerability patch. Said it likely prevented a multi-unit disruption during an active deployment. No one was harmed, and thanks to our team's silent fix, a planned maneuver had gone off without a hitch. We don't give out medals for this stuff, he said. But make no mistake, this was operationally critical. I said, that's enough for me. He paused, then added, one of the officers affected mentioned you by name. Said you'd never taken credit. I wasn't looking for credit, I said. Just access. That. He chuckled. Well, you've got that. After we hung up, I stared at my computer for a long time. The feeling sitting in my chest wasn't pride. It was relief, like I could finally breathe without checking my pulse. I closed my laptop and didn't open it again for the rest of the day. At 6:11 p.m., I got another message, this time from Sean. You ever notice they only notice you when someone else salutes first? I laughed. That night, Danielle showed up at my apartment. I opened the door expecting a baby carrier, a diaper bag, some sort of performative chaos. She came alone. Hair pulled back, no makeup, holding a Tupperware container like it was a peace offering. "Mom said you probably hadn't eaten," she muttered. I took the container and said, "That's cute, considering I'm the only one who knows how to make food safe on their Wi-Fi." She rolled her eyes, stepped inside, and sat on the edge of my couch like it was booby-trapped. After a long pause, she asked, "So what is it you really do?" I leaned against the wall and tilted my head. "You mean besides fixing Dad's emails and keeping Kyle from Venmo scams?" She exhaled, annoyed. "I mean, like, the real stuff. The stuff Sean knows. Why did he salute you?" I walked over to my desk, picked up a folder completely blank on the outside and handed it to her. It was empty, of course, but the point was made. She looked at it, then looked at me. "You've been doing this the whole time?" I nodded. "And you never told us?" "You never asked." Silence. Heavy but different this time. Not hostile, more like exposed. She shook her head. "I mean, I always thought you were smart, but I didn't think that I mattered," I said flatly. She flinched. "No," she said, "that you were, like, real." I didn't respond. Just walked into the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water. Behind me, she added, "Sean said the whole briefing was about your work, that his CO called it a quiet save. He said you probably saved their entire squad." I took a sip. The water was cold and clean. It felt good. Then Danielle said something I didn't expect. "I think I was jealous. You never needed anyone to clap for you." I looked at her. "You needed that?" She shrugged. "Didn't know I did. Until I realized the room went silent for you, and I've never seen that happen for anyone." There, I put down the glass. "You know what's funny? I didn't even want that moment, but it changed everything." "No," I said. "It just showed everything." She blinked. "There's a difference," I added. She stood up, uncertain. I could tell she wanted to say something warm, or soft, or even just vaguely nice, but she didn't know how. Our family didn't train for that. Instead, she said, "I should get back. Mom's probably texting the neighbors about how you work for the Pentagon now." And of 20. "She'd be wrong," I said. "But not totally wrong." Danielle walked to the door. "Are we good?" she asked. I considered it. "We're better than we were yesterday." She nodded. That was as close to closure as we were going to get. After she left, I microwaved whatever was in the Tupperware. It tasted like overcooked pasta and guilt, but I ate every bite. Not because it was good, but because for once, it was handed to me without a punchline. 2 days later, Mom sent an email with the subject line, "Let's talk." Inside was a long paragraph about forgiveness, family, and how everyone has their own way of showing pride. It was dressed up in the kind of soft-serve Christian language she pulled from Facebook memes, things like, "We're all broken vessels," and "God sees the full picture." I didn't reply. The next day, Kyle sent me a blurry screenshot of an article on military cyber readiness. My name wasn't in it, obviously, but he captioned it, "This you?" I didn't respond to that either. Something had shifted, and they felt it, but I had no interest in walking back inside just because the door was open. A burnt bridge doesn't rebuild itself just because someone yells from the other side. So, I kept my head down and poured everything into work. Elise, the junior analyst I'd been mentoring, was taking on her first real deployment tier assignment. She'd been quietly shadowing me for months, scribbling notes, asking smart questions. The kind of person who didn't need to be told something twice. One of the few people I didn't have to prove myself to every 5 minutes. I asked if she was ready to lead a red team drill solo. She said, "I've been ready for weeks. You were just waiting for me to say it." Exactly. I gave her the reins, monitored from the background. When she pulled off a clean breach and counter-trace during the simulation, the whole control room applauded. She didn't cry. She just grinned like someone who knew exactly how much power she had and finally got to use it. That felt better than any speech or salute I'd ever received. Back at my desk, I had a message from an old Air Force buddy named Mira. She'd moved to Colorado Springs and was working with a small cybersecurity firm that partnered with the Air Force Academy on simulations and training. She asked if I'd be interested in consulting. I stared at the screen for a long time. A fresh start, new altitude. Real mountains instead of metaphorical ones. I said yes. When I told my supervisor I was leaving, he didn't blink. He just said, "It's about time. You've been outgrowing us for a year." I sold my apartment in 2 weeks. Didn't tell the family. Didn't owe them that. Instead, I emailed Danielle one line. "Moving to Colorado. You don't need to reply." She did, of course. "Is this because of everything?" I didn't answer. I figured the silence would explain itself. I blocked the family group chat, deleted every photo from the last 5 years that had me awkwardly standing off to the side with a plastic plate and a fake smile. Donated the framed family portrait from Mom's house to Goodwill. If they wanted to remember me, they could do it from memory. Colorado was quiet in the best way. Dry air, sharp sky. A town where nobody knew my parents' names or my siblings' accomplishments. Where I wasn't the weird one, just Monica from the firm. I bought a second-hand Jeep. Learned how to make a proper cup of coffee without a K-cup. Found a bar that played blues on Thursdays and served whiskey without ice unless you asked. Started sleeping 8 hours a night for the first time in years. Elise called one night to ask about a weird security flag on her latest project. I walked her through it in 5 minutes. At the end she said, "Thanks, boss." I smiled at the word. Not out of ego. Just recognition. One afternoon, I got a letter in the mail with no return address. Inside was a printout of the security bulletin from my last Navy project, the one Sean had been part of. On the bottom corner, scrawled in pen, it said, "Still watching, still grateful." No signature. I knew who it was from. I didn't frame it, just folded it back up and slid it into the drawer next to my passport and my first military ID. Every so often, Danielle sent photos of the baby. No captions, just images. She never asked for anything. She never said thank you. But the pictures came every few months like clockwork. I never replied, but I looked at them. In the final photo she sent that fall, the baby was dressed in a Halloween costume, a tiny astronaut suit. The patch on the chest read, "Mission Control." Cute. That night, I stood on my porch, mug in hand, and watched the stars rise above the Rockies. I could still name the constellations by heart. Still remembered which satellites were military grade, which were commercial, and which ones I'd personally helped defend from digital collapse. No one here knew that. And no one needed to. Because for the first time in my life, I didn't need someone else's applause to feel real. I had my own signal now. And it was strong. I was midway through setting up a training environment for the new Academy cadets when the call came in. Unknown number. Georgia area code. I let it go to voicemail. An hour later, another call. Then a text. "Mom's asking if you'll come home for Thanksgiving. Just dinner, nothing dramatic. Danielle." I didn't reply. My inbox had 2 more emails from Mom that week. One was a forwarded recipe for sweet potato casserole with a note that said, "I remember you liked this one." The other was a blurry photo of Dad wearing an apron that read Grill Sergeant. I stared at it for a while, then archived both without opening them. It wasn't anger, not anymore. It was more like watching people knocking on a door that had been welded shut months ago. You don't unseal steel just because someone brought pie. Thanksgiving came and went. I made my own meal stuffing, mashed potatoes, cornbread. No turkey. I never actually liked turkey. I ate in silence while watching a rerun of Jeopardy, and couldn't remember the last time I'd felt so calm on a holiday. In December, Elise flew out to visit. She'd made it through her first full threat detection cycle and earned a commendation from the Joint Task Force. She brought a bottle of scotch and said, "I figured you wouldn't accept congratulations, so I brought bribery." We sat on the porch wrapped in old Air Force hoodies, drinking quietly under the cold sky. "You ever regret leaving?" she asked. I knew she didn't mean the project. She meant all of it. "No," I said. "But I regret staying as long as I did." She nodded like she already knew the answer. Just after Christmas, I got a letter in the mail. Handwritten. Careful, cursive. It was from my mom. "I know we didn't understand you. I don't think we ever really tried. But I see now that maybe we were too busy looking at what you weren't, instead of who you actually are. I don't expect you to forgive us. I just want you to know we're still here. Love, Mom." There was no guilt in it, no manipulation, just a quiet admission. 10 years too late. I folded it and placed it in the back of my desk drawer. I didn't write back. I didn't hate them. That would have taken energy I no longer gave away for free. What I felt now was cleaner. More still. like I had exhaled something I'd been holding since I was 19. A month later, I gave a presentation at a private defense conference in D.C. My name was on the roster. No code names. No acronyms. Just Monica Kessler, Senior Advisor, Strategic Cyber Defense. I spoke for 20 minutes. The room was quiet the entire time. Afterward, a man in uniform approached me. Colonel, judging by the tabs. He shook my hand and said, "We've been following your work for years. I didn't realize you were the one behind the Bellamy intervention." I didn't react. He added, "I was stationed out there during that breach. You changed the whole game." I said, "Glad it helped." He nodded and walked away. No fanfare, no selfie requests, just respect. The kind that doesn't need explaining. The next day, I got an email from my father. It was short. I saw the article. "You were always more than we gave you credit for. I hope you're doing well." I closed it. Didn't delete it. Didn't respond. Instead, I opened a folder on my desktop labeled Private. Inside was the security brief I'd written on the day I found the flaw in Sean's comms. I reread the final line. Impact. 0 casualties. 0 delay. Full continuity. Recommendation. Implement her protocol chain across all deployments. That was my name in the protocol chain. My logic. My signature. My footprint. They didn't need to know every detail. Because I did. And that was enough. Later that week, a cadet at the academy asked me what the hardest part of my job had been. I said, convincing people I was useful. He laughed like it was a joke. I didn't laugh back. I got the email around 6:45 p.m., just as I was packing up for the day. Subject line, from Danielle. No emojis, no passive-aggressive tone, just plain text. I almost didn't open it. Not because I was angry, but because I already knew what it would say. Apologies always arrived after the damage had dried. Still, I clicked. "Monica, I know we never really saw you. I think I've known that for a long time, but I didn't want to admit it, because if I admitted it, then I'd have to admit what kind of sister I was. I've replayed that night, the salute, over and over in my head. I don't know why it hit me the way it did. Maybe it was the silence. Maybe it was the way everyone just looked at you like they'd never seen you before. I think it was the first time I actually saw you, too. I'm sorry. For the way I joked about your work, for pretending you didn't matter, for standing by while other people laughed at you, for not asking, and for assuming I already knew the answer. I don't expect you to come back. I don't even expect you to respond. But I needed to say it out loud, and maybe let you know that if one day you do feel like talking, I'll be here. Danielle." I read it twice. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't laced with excuses or barbed grace. It was just honest. A rarity in our family, where honesty usually showed up wearing guilt as armor. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I sat in the dark office, the only light coming from the screen, and let myself feel something I hadn't in a long time. Stillness. Not pride. Not sadness. Just stillness. Like I wasn't moving uphill anymore. 3 days passed. I didn't write back. Then, one morning, I was walking past a small cafe near base when I spotted a familiar figure at an outdoor table. Danielle. Alone. No stroller, no husband. Just a coffee and a paperback she probably wasn't reading. I could have kept walking. I could have ducked behind the sandwich board and made it to my car without being seen. But I didn't. I walked straight over. She looked up and blinked like she wasn't sure I was real. "Hey," I said. She put the book down slowly. "Hey." I gestured to the seat across from her. "Taken?" She shook her head. I sat. She didn't speak. Neither did I. For a full minute, we just shared air and history. Finally, she said, "I wasn't expecting. I didn't come here to forgive you," I said. Not cruelly, just plainly. Her face fell a little. She nodded. I figured. Eintex. I sipped the coffee the waitress had silently placed in front of me. Bitter. Perfect. "I came here to make one thing clear," I continued. "I'm not broken. I don't need fixing. I don't need validating. I don't need your apology to feel whole." She looked down. "Okay. I'm not angry anymore," I added. "But I'm not obligated to step back into the same dynamic just because you realize too late who I am." End of 4. Danielle sat very still, her hands cupped around her mug like she needed it to stay grounded. "I believe you mean it," I said. "And I appreciate that, but that doesn't change the years of being invisible. You don't get to be proud of me now because someone else saluted first." Her eyes glassed over, but she didn't cry. That was new. Growth, maybe. "I'm not asking to be part of the family again," I said. "I'm not asking for an invite to brunch or a second chance at Christmas. I just want peace, my own, on my terms." She nodded slowly. "I don't expect anything anymore. I just wanted you to know." I stood up. "I do know," I said. Then, before I turned to leave, I added, "That's more than I used to get." I didn't look back when I walked away. Not because I was trying to be dramatic, but because I didn't need to see her reaction to know it landed. That night, I took a long walk through the snow-dusted streets near my building. The cold felt good. Sharp, honest, like something that couldn't be softened with apologies or rewritten with late-arriving guilt. When I got home, there was a package at my door. No return label. Inside was a framed photo. Me in the background of that retirement dinner, frozen in the moment Sean saluted. Someone must have snapped it at the perfect time. The lighting was weird, and the angle wasn't flattering, but none of that mattered. Underneath it, a small note. Some things don't need to be explained. They just need to be remembered. No signature. Just my name on the envelope. I set the frame on my desk, didn't hang it, didn't post it, just let it sit. Some people collect trophy. Some collect memory. Me? I collected silence. And finally, it was the kind that felt earned. The invitation came through official channels: Department of Defense, Cybersecurity and National Infrastructure Annual Summit, Washington, D.C. Not public-facing, not broadcasted. Just a sterile PDF with a seal at the top and my name printed in clean, bold letters. I was listed as a panelist, not a guest speaker, not a tag-along analyst, a panelist, with clearance-level topics, with my own nameplate. I'd been to these events before, always seated in the second row, always 2 badges removed from anyone with authority. This time, I was walking in through the side entrance with a private lanyard and a Navy escort. The moment I stepped into the room, I felt it. This wasn't just a job anymore. It was a legacy. I ran into Sean just outside the green room. He was in uniform again, but more relaxed. Like the edge had dulled, but the spine was still steel. "Didn't expect to see your name on the schedule," he said with a smirk. I raised an eyebrow. "Didn't expect you to still be wearing that uniform after what you said about early retirement." He shrugged. "Turns out watching you get things done made me rethink quitting." I didn't respond to that. I didn't need to. He held the door open for me, then said, "By the way, your parents are here." I froze. Mid-step. He added, "I didn't invite them. I just saw them walk in. They're sitting in the back." I swallowed once, calmly. "Okay," I said. "Are you good with that?" he asked. "I'm not here for them," I said. And I wasn't. The panel started on time. 4 of us at a long black table, 2 DoD insiders, 1 Department of Energy advisor, and me. We each gave a 10-minute breakdown of real-world defense simulations, zero-day threat maps, and systemic protocol redesigns for compromised infrastructure. When it was my turn, I stood. No slides. Just a pointer and a black screen with a simple heading. The Human Variable in National Defense Networks. I kept it clean, direct, American. No metaphors. No fluff. I talked about moments, real ones. About how blind spots aren't always technical. Sometimes, the biggest risk isn't malware, it's ego. I told a story about a breach that started with a forgotten password and ended with a base shutdown. I didn't name names. I didn't need to. At one point, I said, "People assume our job is to stop bad guys. It's not. Our job is to protect good ones before they ever realize they were in danger." The room was still. The kind of silence you get when people realize they've missed something obvious for years. I didn't look at the audience much, but at the very end, right as I closed my laptop, I let my eyes wander. They were there. Back row. Mom in a pearl-colored sweater she probably wore to church. Dad in a stiff blazer that didn't fit the way it used to. Both sitting upright, hands in their laps, mouths closed. They didn't wave. They didn't smile. They just watched. And I let them. After the panel, I slipped into the back hallway, away from the reception line. Sean found me again. They stayed for the whole thing, he said. Didn't fidget onsa. I nodded. That's new. They didn't approach you, he added. They won't. You okay with that? I looked him in the eye. Yeah, I said. That's the part I'm finally good with. Later that evening, I got back to my hotel room and found a note slipped under the door. No room number, just my name in cursive. Inside was a folded card, short, unsigned. We came to listen. Not to speak. We heard you. We're still listening. I stared at the card for a full minute. Then I placed it on the desk, face down, and opened my laptop. There was a message from a cybersecurity initiative run through NATO. They wanted to bring me on as a senior advisor. Europe. Long-term contract. No press. Just war games, policy design, and real prevention. I accepted without hesitation. That night, I walked the streets of DC alone, past monuments I'd seen 1,000 times but never at night. I passed couples taking selfies, tourists in matching hoodies, military officers on smoke breaks. I didn't feel small, or invisible, or loud. I felt like myself. I wasn't someone's daughter, or someone's sister, or the backup brain who fixed the Wi-Fi. I was Monica Kessler. And in this city, this capital of noise and importance, I had finally stopped whispering. The next morning, I skipped the conference breakfast and took the early Amtrak West. No first-class seat, no laptop open. Just a window view and a quiet train car that hummed like a heartbeat in the background. I watched the skyline fade behind me, glass and steel turning into rusted bridges, then forests, then flat stretches of land that reminded me how big the country really was. No Wi-Fi. No family thread pinging about who's bringing rolls to Easter dinner. Just stillness. Back in Colorado, snow had started to dust the rooftops. It wasn't much, but it made everything look soft, like even the harshest angles in my life had finally blurred out. I picked up groceries, made a fire in the wood stove, and turned my phone off. When I opened my laptop later that evening, I didn't go straight to email. I opened a blank document and typed one sentence. No one has to understand your worth for it to be real. Then I saved it. Not for publishing, not for anyone else, just for me. Work slowed down in the best way. Elise took over most of the day-to-day team coordination. The cadets I'd trained started teaching each other. I still consulted mostly strategy, deep-level protocol design, but I was no longer holding the weight of everyone's expectations like a shield. Sometimes people asked about my background. I told them what mattered. That I'd served, that I'd transitioned, that I'd stayed sharp. No need to explain the rest. One afternoon in February, I got a letter. Not from anyone I expected. It was from a woman in Texas whose son had been stationed in Sean's unit during that Pacific deployment. She wrote, I don't know exactly what you did, but my boy came home and told me someone in the background saved their asses. If that was you, thank you. I sleep better because of it. She included a photo of her son holding his newborn daughter. I pinned it to my corkboard next to the quote I'd typed for myself. 2 quiet reminders. One earned, one written. Spring came early that year. Melted snow, soft wind. I started biking again, something I hadn't done since college. I'd forgotten how good it felt to move fast with no engine, no destination, just legs and balance and gravity doing its work. One day, I passed a small military memorial on the outskirts of town. No one was there. No flags, just a stone wall with names I didn't recognize. I stopped anyway, not to salute, not to reflect in some performative way, just to stand still and exist in a space where service was written in silence, not in ceremony. And I realized something standing there. All those years I thought I wanted recognition, a thank you, a seat at the table, a family that clapped when I walked in the room. But what I really wanted was to live without having to justify that I mattered. Now I could. A few weeks later, I ran into a retired Air Force colonel at a coffee shop. He recognized me from the DC panel and said, "You're that woman who fixed the Navy net without ever taking credit." I smiled. "No," I said. "I'm the woman who stopped needing credit." He laughed. Even better. We talked for 20 minutes about joint force bureaucracy. Then I walked out and didn't even think to look back. Danielle emailed once that summer. Just a picture. Her daughter, now 2, holding a toy laptop. No message, just that. I didn't reply. but I saved it. Later that year, I bought a small cabin near Cripple Creek. Solar panels, no HOA, enough land for a garden I'd probably forget to water. It wasn't a retirement home, it was a sovereignty home. A place where no one expected anything from me but presence. I called it Outpost M, just for fun. The last time someone from my family called, it was Kyle. A voicemail. I listened, only once. Hey, just wanted to say, I get it now. Not everything has to be loud to be strong. Hope you're well. Delete. Not out of spite. Just because I didn't need it anymore. Now, when I tell people I used to work for the government, they usually ask, like spy stuff? I shrug. Something like that. I don't offer details. I don't tell them about the salute, about the slideshow, about the family dinners I sat through invisible. Because the real win wasn't proving them wrong. It was never needing their approval again. And that's the story. No revenge. No redemption arc with swelling music. Just a woman who knew what she did. And never asked anyone else to clap. And that was enough. I don't tell this story because I want sympathy or praise or some cinematic ending where everyone hugs and learns a lesson. That's not how real life works. I tell it because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is walk away without slamming the door. To stop explaining, stop defending, stop waiting for someone to say, we were wrong about you. You don't need their words. You need your own. I didn't win anything in this story. Not a medal, not a headline, not my family's understanding, but I did gain something quieter, stronger, peace. And after everything after the laughs, the silence, the salute, that turned out to be the only thing I ever really wanted.